Hey guys, how you doing? In the last video, we looked at the need to use very specific language when we're teaching and why it's important. We just continue on a little bit about this. And we have to ask ourselves, why should we use very specific language when we're teaching? Well, we have to look at what we're trying to achieve. And what we're trying to achieve for our students is for them to become more skilled at Wing Tsun. And it has to be objective, measurable, real skill. And as per all the learning experts in the world, maybe Malcolm Gladwell in his book Outliers with the 10,000 hour rule, or Matthew Syed with his book Bounce, it all comes down to practice, practice, practice. But it can't just be any old practice. It has to be very specific, very focused practice. Only with focused practice can you become skilled at something. And that's our job as teachers, to help the students in their quest for very focused, specific practice. A lot of the time when people talk about Wing Tsun, they say you need to be soft. Well, what does soft mean? Soft is only a four-letter word used to describe economy of motion. So we have to go a little bit deeper than this. And really, when we're talking about economy of motion, when we're talking about economy of motion, what we're really looking at is energy. What we're really talking about, we're talking about the most efficient way to use energy. So again, we have to look at the different types of energy. We have to look at what energy is. And a very common definition of energy is the ability to do work. It's the properties of one object to do physical work under properties of another object. This is a very common definition of energy. Another thing about energy is that energy cannot be created and it can't be destroyed. Energy can only be converted from one form into another. And there are various types of energy. For example, solar energy, gravitational energy, chemical energy, and for our purposes when it comes to physical movement in Wing Tsun, mechanical energy. And mechanical energy is the motion and position of an object. And mechanical energy can be broken down into kinetic energy and potential energy. Kinetic energy looks at the motion of an object through space. Potential energy, which can also be known as stored energy, potential energy looks at the position of an object in a field. And the thing about kinetic energy and potential energy is that the two of them have an inverse relationship to each other. So the more kinetic energy you have, the less potential. And the more potential energy you have, the less kinetic energy. An example would be a roller coaster. When the car is at the top of the roller coaster, the potential energy is at its maximum. As it starts to go down the roller coaster, the potential energy rapidly diminishes, while the kinetic energy rapidly increases. As the car gets to the end of the roller coaster, the kinetic energy is at its maximum. And as the car starts going up the roller coaster again, the kinetic energy drops off and the potential energy increases. And that's one example of kinetic energy and potential energy. And we can subdivide, as I said, mechanical energy into kinetic energy and potential energy, but also different types of energy. For example, gravitational energy, we can divide into kinetic and potential. And here's one example here, for example, of gravitational potential energy. As I lift up the pad from the floor, I've now stored gravitational potential energy in the pad. I'm holding it up. So there's no kinetic energy. Gravitational potential energy is at its maximum. And then when I drop it, potential energy diminishes, decreases, disappears, and is converted into kinetic energy. Another type of potential energy is elastic potential energy. If I get something, an object which has elastic properties, when I pull it back, elastic potential energy is being stored and there's no kinetic energy. But when I release it, the potential energy is released as kinetic energy. And again, I'm releasing elastic potential energy. as kinetic energy. And then when I'm doing a bong sound, as an example, here's just another example of elastic potential energy. And I think you can see where we're going with this. And finally, to finish off, when we store gravitational potential energy, it's pretty constant. As soon as you drop it, it automatically converts to kinetic energy. And with the stick here, with the flexible stick, when I pull it back, the properties are pretty constant. As soon as I let go, it automatically springs into kinetic energy. The same isn't true with our body. It's not true with our muscles. So for example, a lot of people would be too soft and floppy, and there's no build-up of elastic potential energy. Other people are too stiff, so that they can't store the elastic potential energy, and it's nothing. So we have to do something. We have to make a conscious decision. We have to do something with our muscles in order to store elastic potential energy. What do we have to do? Well, we'll look at that in the next video. Thanks, guys.